Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be here in Glentees. Thank you, Sean, for that kind introduction. I mentioned to Pascal just earlier, this is, I think, the third time in about 4 weeks that we've spoken on a panel together. I've deduced either we complement one another or somebody has decided that we can't be let out alone. But I am going to get to what Sean spoke about in terms of our response. I don't plan to dwell on that too much, but maybe start by, I suppose, I was here earlier and uncertainty appears to be the mot du jour, or more accurately, I think, the mot de l'année. It pervades the political, the economic, and the business environment. It is to the forefront of the minds of the investors that we deal with. This uncertainty is obviously driven by geopolitical developments, by a rise in nationalistic populism, questioning of capitalism, questioning of globalization. And the panel this afternoon, for those of you who are there, I think, dealt with it in great depth, and Bridget Laffin outlined, I think, in great depth what is happening in the world. I suppose the two most prominent manifestations of the New World Order are obviously Brexit and the changed political environment in the US. However, there are many other manifestations, and to Sean's point, IDA operates in the global world. We have investment from all over the world at this point, still dominated by the US, but growing investment from Asia and significant investment from the rest of Europe also. So, going to have a quick look at the impact of these developments, focusing on Brexit and the US, what impact they have in the Irish context, on the economy, enterprise, trade, investment, obviously particularly focused on foreign direct investment. And there are essentially just 5 points that I want to make. And the first of those points is that Ireland's stability is seen as a strength in this very uncertain world that we're all talking about. Businesses doesn't like uncertainty. They will take steps to mitigate that risk. We see that in the context of Brexit. We see UK companies moving now to put the access to the European market, their access to the European market, beyond doubt. While it may be curious to some who follow the personalities and the colour at play at a political level within Ireland, my job is obviously to look at things in an international context, and I spend a lot of time outside of the country, and it's probably easier to look at it from a kind of a 35,000 feet perspective. And I can confirm that Ireland looks remarkably stable, centrist and consistent in policy terms. And that is a major plus when we are trying to sell Ireland abroad. It is a major plus when we are trying to attract investors into this country, investors who crave that certainty. So that's a big plus at the moment. Second point is that Ireland's place is as an open economy and as a member of the EU if we want to attract that investment. Since the 1950s, we have embraced globalisation. The far-sighted thinking of another generation, led by people like T.K. Whitaker, saw Ireland turn its back on protectionism and open up to trade and investment. And we understood that actually probably our greatest natural resource is our people. I think we in this country understand and take it for granted that we have to trade and we have to attract investment if we want to earn our way in the world. As a small economy on the western edge of Europe, I think forcibly reinforced by where we are here in Glentees this evening, we have to engage. We have to be connected to the outside world, and we have to earn our way in that world, and the only two ways of doing that are through trade and investment. That same understanding has propelled the Irish and European and the global economy forward in recent decades, but now we may be at a crossroads. As we look east and west, we see our neighbours once again becoming more protectionist. We, as I said, see a type of populist nationalism rising in the world that doesn't recognise that interdependence. Globalisation has been good for Ireland. Opening up to the world has led to prosperity and growth. While we can debate whether that prosperity is evenly distributed, or indeed whether over the decades it has been used wisely at times, I think few would dispute that we are better off now as a result of globalisation than we were in the 1940s and 50s. A more protectionist global economy is not good for Ireland, but we have to deal with what's before us. And I'll come back to what we need to do in that regard in a few moments. For those who have advocated for Ireland to consider following the UK and leaving the European Union, I say this: such a move would put an end to foreign direct investment as we know it. Investors in Ireland value that access to the European Union, to the European market. In fact, it is one of the primary reasons that they're here. They're not here to service a local Irish market. They are here to access a European market of 500 million people and access the European labour market of 200 million people. And anything that puts that in doubt causes us a difficulty. And if you want to understand that difficulty, all you need to do is open the paper every morning and see companies in the UK, particularly at the moment in the City of London, considering where their location is going to be post-Brexit. We must remain open. We must remain welcoming. We must value the diversity that brings. We must remain open to ideas, to innovation, to business, and to trade and investment. We must embrace the next wave of technologies. By the way, technological development and advancement will have a profound impact on the future of work, and it is a discussion for another day, but is something that we have to keep an eye to. The third thing is we must protect the hard-won progress and our restored reputation. Being subject to the vagaries of the global economy has its ups and downs, and Ireland has experienced both. The recovery was hard won. The restoration of our reputation abroad was extremely hard won. I don't think anybody in this room needs a lesson on, the impact of the twin impacts of a global banking crisis and a self-made property bubble, and the data that went with that, whether you look at employment or debt or anything else, the difficulties that this country encountered and the experience of people on the ground as a result of that. We can say that the recovery has taken hold. There is obviously more to be done, and there is more to be done certainly in achieving regional balance and things like that. But there is a danger also that there is now a feeling of job done. And once again, the narrative in some quarters turns exclusively to how we should distribute the wealth that the economy is generating. While, of course, it is entirely legitimate to debate how one improves the lives of citizens and the relative merits of different cohorts' needs and demands, to focus exclusively on it, to the exclusion of discussion of how that wealth will be generated in a sustainable way in the future, would be folly. We need to ensure that the productive elements of our economy that generate wealth and ultimately pay for social services and provide the standard of living that exists in the country are continually tended to, as well as making progress on the many social challenges that undoubtedly remain. The notion that the economy will continue to grow and create jobs in perpetuity in the absence of appropriate policy development and execution would be naive. There are real threats to employment again, particularly in those sectors that are heavily exposed to the UK market. We need to ensure that insofar as is possible, we insulate ourselves against those threats and maximise the opportunities that may exist from Brexit in terms of mobile investment. Turning to Brexit and the change in the US administration, which presents both challenges and opportunities. If I take Brexit first, the UK exit obviously is not what we wanted. It is overwhelmingly a negative for Ireland on multiple fronts. There are indigenous sectors of the economy in particular heavily exposed in terms of agri-food, fisheries. From an FDI perspective, as Sean mentioned, it presents both challenges and opportunities, and I'm going to talk about the challenges first because they are overlooked at times. They include the fact that in the absence of the UK weakens the European market and therefore weakens our attractiveness for foreign direct investment. The Brexit will undoubtedly, I think, slow growth in the other EU 27. The UK has made it clear that they will be outside both the single market and the customs union, which creates huge issues and impacts investors in terms of supply chains. It creates a new ring-fenced UK market, so companies based here in Ireland have to now consider how they access that market going forward. And there are sectors in our portfolio of companies, particularly in the engineering sector, who are heavily exposed to the UK in the same way many of the indigenous companies are, and that will pose a difficulty for them. On the opportunity side, many companies based in the UK are now looking at their European footprint in a post-Brexit world. The first sector, obviously, where it has impacted most visibly is financial services. And we have been engaged with companies in the UK prior to the Brexit referendum in anticipation that it may be an outcome. And we've worked through with them to the point where they are now at the point where they're making decisions. It is also true to say that we have now expanded those discussions well beyond the financial services sector. Anything that is touched by regulation, any sector that's touched by regulation is interested in where it needs to be based in a post-Brexit world. We have seen companies like JP Morgan, Barclays, Legal & General, Chaucer, Beasley Ree and Almac announced that they will use Ireland as their post-Brexit location. So we're making steady progress in terms of winning investment. I am confident that we will see more Brexit-related investments over the coming months, but we cannot be complacent. These investments will not fall into our lap. They will have to be won, and we will have to address the carrying capacity of the economy if those investments are to continue into the future. On the US side, the change of administration has created a new dynamic for investors. As I mentioned, 70% of our investment comes from the US. The reaction from corporate America to the change of administration, I think, was broadly positive in terms of the high-level prescriptions that the Trump administration has set out. This positivity emanates from the prospect that they may get tax reform, something around repatriation of profits, a stimulus package, and better or lighter regulation. There are also, however, concerns around more protectionist trade policies and, indeed, migration. Campaign promises such as making America great again and bringing jobs back home has given rise to speculation as to whether US multinationals will invest abroad. And I think the dearth of detail around what the actual policy prescription is has also created uncertainty. Due to that, IDA would have expected in the first half of this year to see a slowing of investment and a slowing of decisions. And we did observe some of that in the first quarter of the year, but that quickly passed. And in the second quarter, we saw investment started to flow as we would expect it, indeed made up all of the ground and then some on a like-for-like comparison with the previous year. Notwithstanding that the detailed policies have yet to be revealed by the US side, and I think right now there's every reason to believe that we will continue to see investment in Europe and in Ireland from the US as they seek markets, they seek talent, they seek innovation, and they seek certainty. And these are the things which will hold true regardless of what the policy prescription is in the US. Finally and fifthly, we need to focus on those things that are within our control, our competitiveness. There are any number of international developments that we might lament, but largely they are outside our control. We need to focus on those aspects which are within our control. Those things are varied, but they largely fall under a heading of competitiveness, whether it's education and talent availability, infrastructure, roads, public transport, broadband, utilities, energy, water, waste, costs, tax, regulation. They all make a difference to investment decisions by multinationals, but also to Irish companies and Irish entrepreneurs. Our multinationals tell us that overall they're happy with competitiveness, they're happy with the policy environment that is here. Our proposition remains strong. It is enhanced by some of the decisions of our neighbours, East and West. If you take an area like talent, we have a lot of companies who see Ireland as a place now to build out their global teams as both the US and UK increase the walls in terms of access from other countries. Two areas where companies have identified that we need to make progress, there's no great surprise, housing availability and costs, and personal taxation rates are two areas which they say to us that over time we need to make progress. The areas that need attention, I think, are clearly articulated by the National Competitiveness Council. Action is required, including the need to prioritise and target capital investment in competitive and productivity-enhancing infrastructure. I know there was a discussion on this afternoon. Diversify our enterprise space, expanding into new markets, products and sectors. Addressing the residential housing supply, which I've mentioned. Maintain vigilance in terms of public finances and ensuring a broad enterprise-friendly tax regime in place, and that we address personal taxation, and that we continue to address the entire cost base and deepen productivity growth. This is a race. Everybody else is running in this race. We are out there trying to compete for business every day of the week, and there are any number of competitors who are trying to win the exact same business that we are, and trying to do it in largely the same ways that we're doing it. And what is all important is the offering, and the offering are the competitive elements I've just mentioned. So I know somebody said to me earlier that there's been an air of pessimism so far, but I am cautiously optimistic about the future. The optimism comes from the fact that we have a really strong pipeline of investments. We are off the back of two of the strongest years' performance in job creation on the FDI side that we've seen since 1999-2000. We now have over 200,000 people employed in multinationals in this country, and we've seen obviously the unemployment rate tumble. The caution comes from the fact there is any amount of uncertainty out there, and things change, and we need to be able to adapt and change with them. But if we apply the same diligence that we have applied over the last number of years in terms of righting the economy and driving growth, there's every reason to believe that we can continue to grow the economy, and foreign direct investment will certainly play its part in that. Thank you.